They're just joining now. So there's 5, 6 just adding on.
Should we give it a few more minutes for a few more to come in? Then we will. Those of you that have come in, you'll see we've got the programme vision up for people to read. That kind of links us back to where we got at the end of LLF consultations, or LLF forum, should I say, and consultations generally.
Got 11 attendees at the minute.
I have to say, I can't wait to spend my leisure time in Farnham. It's such a lovely place to walk around, shop, eat out, etc. It's just, when is that ever going to happen? It feels so far away.
We were already looking with, there was a deal on, but I think it's a bit too far away for us on the train at the Hog's Back. £49 a night.
There you go.
Oh, yeah,
Beautiful place
really
it
good.
is.
But I don't, Ian, how far out is it, the Hog's Back?
It's only about 1.5 miles.
All right, okay.
You can walk it. You're fit.
All right.
It's a nice. That's the Hog's Back Hotel, is it, Chris?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a nice hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm bringing my wife for a long weekend.
I'm
bringing my wife for a long weekend to do some shopping.
That's why my wife was coming down as well.
Was that your wife celebrating in the background, Jonathan?
It was. She's looking forward to exploring the Independence down Downing Street.
She will be pleased.
We're up to 21 now, Wyatt, if you wanted to kick off.
Sorry, Ian, I missed that.
I said we're up to 21 now, if you wanted to.
Then it does sound sensible we try and make a start, especially since the first thing I need to do is introduce people to what's happening. So we can have the next slide, please, Ian. Hope those are clear to everybody. Can we increase the size of that on the screen?
Yeah, can we go on to the slideshow, please?
Yeah, apologies.
Talking from memory, that this is a 2-hour meeting. Should have kicked off at 6:30. Perhaps we'll catch that up. More importantly for all of you, it is a public meeting and it is recorded. So if you come on the line and give us some views, effectively there'll be public views from whoever's name you've put on the screen that you've used to come in and join us. The array of people you can see at the side at the moment, mainly the presenters, will be the only people whose faces you'll get to see. So if you come in and ask a question, don't worry, we won't be able to take mug shots at the same time. Questions, you can post those if you can't wait in the Q&A, which is meant to be kind of a backup. But the main way which we'd like to take questions is by the raise hand feature, which is that sort of yellow hand that, for me at least, is at the bottom of my screen. We'll be looking at that and using that as a prioritization of the way the questions have come in. But the trouble is, of course, about that is you've got to wait until we get to the discussion section. So if you fear you might forget your questions, lob them into the Q&A area and you'll get them one way or the other. I do expect, of course, your questions and any comments, preferably questions, are brief. And if you go on too long and start grandstanding, then we will do what they're famous for in Cheshire, and that's cut you off. And if we get really, really busy, and I'll be delighted if we get to this stage and we don't get the chance to answer all the questions either written on the Q&A or live in discussion, then you'll get replies to Q&A questions by email later. And if somebody like a chap today finds you not getting a reply to something, do email me personally, because I'm quite good at asking people to catch up on their questions. So, hope that's clear to everybody. Let's proceed. Can we have the next slide, please, Ian? So this is what we're about. We're at the Farnham optimised infrastructure plan, specifically talking to the business people. But I am aware that our last meeting, when we were talking about the first phase, we didn't really get finished because we started to get diverted onto the immediacy of what's happening re ochres and barriers and orange cones in the town centre. Remember, this isn't just about retail businesses, it's about all businesses. So whoever you are, wherever you're from, you're most welcome. So who's who? Rogues Gallery, if you like. If you don't already know me, I'm Councillor Wyatt Ramsdale. I'm the County Councillor for Farnham South. I get to chair some of these. I think technically the Vice Chairman of the local liaison forum process. With me tonight, and yes, he's in on with the professional screen behind it, which I haven't loaded, is Councillor Andy MacLeod. Andy. Andy is the County Councillor for Farnham Central, as well as being a Waverley Borough Councillor and a Farnham Town Councillor, and he's co-chair of the LLFs. Ask him when he gets time to sleep and do anything else, by all means. What I would like to note about Andy is that Andy's a member of the Farnham Residents Group as a councillor, and I'm a Conservative. But despite that potential for conflict, we, and indeed the other councillors involved, Stephen Spence is on the call tonight, have worked together to find what we think is best for Farnham. Now, you may find us disagreeing about things, but they're not political disagreements. They're just valid disagreements about where we're going with these options. And indeed, it's disagreements about the options and what might we do differently that we're all here for tonight. Let me move on to the programme team. The top left in my picture, trying to cross his arms like a cricket referee, is Chris Tunstall.
Hi.
When they come from Durham, they're mad on cricket or something like that. Chris is the interim programme director. And unfortunately, and that's a big unfortunate for me, not for much longer, because he's in the process of handing over to a permanent employee as the programme director. Chris, big thanks to you for all the inspiration, all the practical guidance, even if a lot of it's been based on Durham, that we started. I'm quite sure we wouldn't be where we are without you. Whether I'll ever be able to call the Recklesham bypass Tunstall Way, I don't know, but thank you.
Working on it,
just as important to this team, and I should think on some sort of secondment from Arcadis, the consultancy group, is Paula Gough. Paula gives the impression of working 10 days in 5 to get everything done, but actually doesn't get employed for a full week because she has a young child to look after, and I guess the rest of the family expecting her to do all the wifely things as well. I guess I'm old to make that comment, even if it's not strictly PC. Sorry. And then also on tonight, and doing a big share of the presenting with Chris Tunstall, is Jonathan Foster Clark. Have I got that right?
That's it, yep.
Who is the most senior people from Atkins, who are consultants on the technicalities of the highways issues. Great man to work with, explains lots of stuff so that even I get to understand it. So yet again, I'm looking forward to his share of the presentation that we'll have coming soon. Also in on the picture tonight, looking all goggled up, is with both glasses and headphone, is Alex Pye. Alex is absolutely the man to go to when you're not sure quite why we've done it this way or that way, or can we do it something else, or actually does that option exist somewhere else in the document. It wouldn't surprise me to see Jonathan require Alex to explain somebody's question, and I'm quite sure, given what's happened in the past, we'll see an active Alex in the question time. The other picture that you can see, and I'd like to thank for being here, is Councillor Stephen Spence, who's the Irishman with the beard and glasses. Stephen's also a member of the team of 3 of us that have been involved in this planning issue. Well, it seems like donkey's years now, but it's probably about 3-4 years, Stephen, since we got together as the newly appointed county councillors to do what we thought was a Farnham Town Centre plan, and has expanded from there. And of course, we're delighted that the big guns like Jeremy Hunt and Tim Oliver, the leader of Surrey County Council, are now much involved in putting their funds forward. But again, Stephen has worked with Andy and I jointly to get where we are now. So I think you can see you've got a bunch of people with lots of views, different backgrounds, and a great forum for a discussion when we get to it. although it's only his picture at the moment, I think he leaves that up because he's running around in the background getting lots of stuff done, is Ian Lynch. Ian's the town clerk for Farnham, so that makes him the senior officer in Farnham, the Farnham Town Council, and is a backbone of the logistics of making this event tonight and the similar activities happen. So thank you, Ian. I guess I'm talking too much, so I'll be quickly moving on to the next slide, please. To our objectives today. Now, I did indicate earlier that we didn't properly get finished the consultation at the LLF last time with businesses. So I do want to try and catch up. So if you think there are some needs that weren't mentioned then or haven't been addressed at all, let's hear them. That's what we partly want to achieve. Then we want to give you some awareness, although we really hope you've already read at least the boards that display about the OIP or the short version. The long version is a great read, but it is 86 odd pages. So I'll forgive you if you've not covered all of that. And most importantly, and indeed there's 90 minutes allowed for it, we want your views on the OIP, and we want to know your views on how they should be prioritized. Which are the things that are going to make a difference, or going to make a difference for your businesses? There are several stages. I didn't want to move on quite just yet, but that kind of shows them. Several stages to the OIP, and the OIP, well, it's not an easy read if you're going to just sit down and do it all. In fact, Peter Birch challenged me to try and read it all in 2 hours this afternoon. Peter, you were right. I like to think of it though in terms of where's it got us to, and am I happy with that? Where it's taken us to through lots of logic and neat steps, stuff that you have to get Jonathan and Alex to explain if you really want to know more about, is a list of things, not a list of things, an array of things, of options that they're saying would be perhaps a sensible way forward. And our question is to you is, are they from a business perspective? Because certainly I don't want the consultants, nor do any of us, working up project plans for detailed activities that we turn around to them and say, yeah, but we've always told you we don't want one of those. And the other big shame would be if they've worked up 20 projects and then we turn around and say, yep, but we've really want number 21 because that's what will make the businesses in Farnham explode and become the adventurous town or perhaps even a city of the future. I guess I'm running out of time, so I ought to pass on now to my good friend Chris and Jonathan for their next sections. I think I've just given you earlier enough of an intro, guys.
Thanks for that, Wyatt. If I can just do a couple of slides for people. The first slide is where we are within the programme. We started off back in last year in the summer and the autumn, looking at the vision statement. We'll come on to that in a minute. And we went out for consultation. We got very positive results on that. Massive agreement on what was being proposed. And so that's the basis, that's the vision of what we're looking for Farnham. So everything that we now look to do has to be bedded back in the vision. And if for some reason you think that that's not the case, then please, that's what we want to hear now. As Wyatt says, we've got what we call the optimised infrastructure plan. It's a transport plan. Why optimised? Because it's carbon. And what we're looking for is to meet climate emergency declarations, reduce carbon. So it's optimised to try and minimise carbon. So that's why we call it the optimised infrastructure plan. Bit of a mouthful, but that's the rationale for it. So we're actually at where the red star is. We're consulting, as Wyatt says. What we've got is a list of proposed options. Some of them can go together, some of them might not go at all. But the whole purpose of this is to get people's views, particularly your views as business, because one of our key planks is supporting business and the economy. So whatever we do not want to mitigate against that. The purpose then is to get your views on that. Once we've got that, we'll be coming back with a refined OIP to the board, which will be the back end of May, early June. And at that point, we'll be hopefully agreeing the schemes, particularly the town centre schemes, that we can look to progress. Now, as Wyatt says, what we're not doing at this stage is rushing into designs and coming forward with proposals only for people to say, well, that actually doesn't support what you were saying earlier, and it certainly isn't going to support us as businesses. So those schemes will come out and there'll be separate consultation on them. So if, for example, widening footways, looking at car parking options, looking at cycleways, looking at walking, looking at public transport, looking at freight consolidation, or how we deliver to your businesses, then all of that will be subject to further consultation anyway. Subject to, of course, it's still being in the OIP when we get it agreed in May/June. Thank you for that. So just to remind us, and this is the style that we'll be taking through, the tile that you see on the left-hand side, you'll not read it. Make no apologies for that. These are the actual boards that are used in the consultation. So if anybody's been on the virtual consultation, this is board number 1 and it takes you right through, and it's the boards that we'll be using to go through this. What's on the right-hand side is basically the headlines from the boards. Farnham is a fantastic place. I've already said I came down very early doors back in about December of, not last year, the year before last, 2019. And what a great place. You know, my one comment, I have never seen a town so dominated by the car. It was ridiculous. I just haven't seen it. And I have worked in a number of locations. And it is a town centre that's suffering from congestion and the pollution that goes with it. We know that it's an air quality zone that we're monitoring. So there are issues there. We know, obviously, that the A31 is a major problem. It splits the community in two, north and central, and then South Farnham. And we know whenever there's a problem on that road, the town becomes absolutely clogged. Narrow roads and pavements, but that's what Farnham's about. That's the essence of Farnham. I appreciate, you know, it wasn't built for cars. It wasn't built for the heavies that rumble through. So we've got to try and improve what we've got, but keep Farnham, the sense of Farnham at the same time. All the councils have come together. As Wyatt said, everybody's working together on this. Town Council, Waverley and Surrey County Council. The board that oversees this, you couldn't get a more powerful board. You've got the leaders of all three councils. You've got the deputy leaders of Surrey and Waverley. You've got the divisional members, the three divisional members. You've got all three on tonight of the Surrey County Council. And for good measure, you've also got Jeremy Hunt. So, you know, it's a very powerful board. But the OIP is what we think, but it's what we think. We want to hear what you think on how we can make some major change within Farnham, but still retaining the essence of Farnham. Thank you. Then just to remind the programme vision, I'm not going to read it out because of time, but we consulted on it in the autumn, and it underpins, as I've said earlier, the development of the OIP. And just so we're clear, the objectives that are there on the left-hand side that you can't read is about health and safety and well-being. It's about business and the economy, very important for tonight. It's about responding to climate change, the Owen optimised. It's the enhancing mobility and connectivity. So it is looking at how we can provide options. You know, the number of times we said that it's been said to us, and we are desperately trying not to come across this way, that we are anti-car. We're not, but it's about looking at other options. And can we provide those options? And it is a bit like providing those options first before we actually look to take some of the other opportunities or options away. It's also about community first. It's your town. This is not an exercise that's being run by the 3 councils or by officers to give you something that at the end of the day you don't want. We want this feedback. But I think we all agree something's got to be done. And what we've tried to do is put forward options that could address a number of these issues. And then finally, it's about using new technology, digital, and whatever we do is looking to use new technology to improve on what we've got, to make better use of what we've got. So I'll hand over now to Jonathan. Are you going to take us through?
Thanks, Chris. So I'll take you through the subsequent boards. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the boards, but for those of you who haven't, I strongly recommend that you take a look at them afterwards to sort of pick up the key messages on each of them. And if you have a little more time to perhaps look at the full document to provide that detail on what we're proposing. But in essence, the starting point is looking at where we're at now in terms of the current situation. And we recognise that, you know, Farnham has a strong economy, very highly skilled population, high levels of GDP, high wages, and high levels of economic activity. So we're working from a strong base, and we don't want to be weakening the competitive position of the town. But we also know that there are these real challenges caused by traffic. And indeed, you know, that's going to become an increasingly difficult for the town, because people want to be in high quality places. So where you've got the heavy traffic, the HGVs, the narrow pavements, the issues with severance and poor air quality, increasingly people are going to recognise that that's a real problem. People want to be in places that are high quality and easy to walk around, and that's perhaps a key consideration for the future competitiveness and ability to sort of draw in shoppers into the town. We also have the major challenges caused by the A31 and the railway line, and the fact that they cause severance between the north and south of Farnham, particularly in terms of the limited numbers of crossings of the road and the railway, which means that traffic's concentrated into particular junctions and particular road bridges. And then we have that heavy congestion at Hickley's Corner, where we have those competing traffic movements between the heavy flows that are running eastbound or westbound on the A31, obviously as the primary traffic route through the area, and obviously conflicting with those movements north-south between the station and the town centre. So we need to think of a long-term solution that's going to work there. But underlying all of this, the evidence is showing that Farnham and indeed the wider Surrey very high levels of car dependency. Now, you know, that's partly driven by the socioeconomic situation, the fact that obviously people are able to access cars, but also the relatively limited alternatives that are there for people to get around in terms of the quality of the bus network and the constraints to walking and cycling. So that's something that we need to get to grips with. And I've mentioned this point about the low uptake of public transport. We want to explore why that's the case, what we can do to help more people to use buses to get around the local area and further afield. We've also found that walking is popular for shorter journeys in the town centre, but cycling is much less popular. And part of that is topography, recognising the fact that there are hills and that's a significant constraint, but also the fact that the road network is so busy, there is so much traffic. That's clearly that's a major constraint to getting more people, particularly younger people, and also women onto bikes. In the future. And then of course we have this issue of HGVs. and the impacts on local communities, not only in terms of the town centre and the impacts of deliveries and that creating congestion and safety issues, but we've also flagged from the previous engagements and from our evidence some significant issues in other parts of the town, namely through Wrecklesham and particularly in Upper Hale and North Farnham on the roads around there. And when we look to the future, Surrey has one of the strongest economies in the UK, and we have a lot to work with in terms of the basis that we have for future prosperity. But it means that more people are going to be living and working in the area, and clearly that's going to drive increased traffic, because all the evidence shows that more and more people want to drive more, the more prosperous that they become. So there are going to be significant increases in traffic flows in the area if we don't take action. And critically, looking at the future with carbon, and bearing in mind that we have a legal obligation in the UK to hit net zero by 2050, we're not going to be delivering reductions in emissions sufficiently quickly to meet our national legal obligations. In addition to that, of course, there are also going to be the further problems of congestion, poor air quality, and increased difficulty getting around. So it isn't just the carbon question, it's also there is a clear economic cost to congestion and poor accessibility. So we've drawn together this evidence from the analyses. We've brought together evidence from strategies at international, national, regional and local levels, most particularly the Surrey Economy Strategy, to identify these 4 key objectives. First of all, we've identified the importance of rapidly reducing carbon emissions, because that's a legal requirement for the UK to achieve net zero by 2050. And that's going to involve some difficult choices for all of us in the future in terms of how we run the future economy, how we live our lives, and how we travel. But we also need to be creating well-connected communities in terms of providing people with effective choices to meet their daily economic and day-to-day needs. Critically, supporting Farnham's economy, we know that we're in a position of current strength, but we cannot be complacent. Some recent research that's come through from the likes of KPMG has actually suggested that in the current climate post-COVID, we're actually in danger of levelling down, with places such as Farnham and certainly in terms of Guildford actually facing potential economic challenges in the post-COVID world. And we need to be thinking about what we're going to be doing to get shoppers and the hospitality economy back up and running, and indeed vibrant and dynamic in the way that it was. So whatever we do with transport policy needs to be supporting the future economy of the town. But a clear part of that is going to be improving quality of place in terms of creating destinations that people want to be in. They're not just driving into and out of, but in terms of a quick shop, but they're also spending money on food and drink, and they're also walking across the town to experience the different parts of the offer that are there. So, for example, if people are driving into Brightwells, ensuring that they're crossing across the town centre to also shop in the Independence in Downing Street. That's a critical factor for us, making sure that the whole of the town centre will work. Next slide, please. So moving on seamlessly to the town centre, we've identified a wide range of options, but the focus is ensuring that we have a properly integrated strategy, that it's not just a series of disconnected components, that the whole actually works together and it's all coherent. But critically, we need to ensure that we have high quality public spaces and people can move around easily to shop, to eat and drink, and to spend money in the town centre fundamentally. And a key part of that is going to be integrating the walking routes from the new development areas such as Brightwells, but also in the future Woolmead, and fully integrating those into the wider town centre. So connecting through to across South Street and into the borough, and then eventually into Downing Street to ensure that we get that footfall across the whole of the town centre. But as part of this, we do need major changes to the town centre road layout. We know that the gyratory system at the moment, where traffic is forced to follow, a long way around the town centre one-way layout to get to a particular car park, that's creating major problems in terms of forcing traffic onto streets where really it doesn't belong. Why does all the traffic from the west and the north have to use the borough, for example? Surely there could be a more rational way of directing traffic into and through the town centre. And with that, we'd be expecting major changes, improvements to the walking experience by reallocating traffic to different streets. And we talk here also about better management of car parking, and we're conscious that there's probably going to be quite a bit of discussion about that. But we do need to be thinking about how we can best direct people to the best car park without them necessarily having to spend a huge amount of time circulating in the town centre. And through that, we'll be looking at the roles of the different of the existing car parks, how they're used, how they can be used better, and also providing better alternatives for parking on the edges of the town and in different places, such as, for example, at Riverside, and providing new high quality walking links through Borellis, for example. Public transport's also going to be important, recognising the role of the town centre, and critically as well, the role of deliveries, better managing deliveries in the town centre through providing better facilities off street for larger vehicles to offload into smaller vehicles to deliver to local businesses. Next slide, please. I'm going to rattle on because I'm conscious of time. In terms of North Farnham, again, we've identified a wide range of interventions, and importantly, we've taken into account the potential impacts of the changes to the road layout in the town centre, and to mitigate and properly manage the effects of traffic in the north of the town, including extensive traffic management measures and improved bus services to connect through and across the border into Aldershot. Key part of our work also will be looking at the potential benefits of the Western Bypass, and if and how that might actually help sort some of the problems in the north and the centre of the town, and if not, to have an honest conversation about whether we should be progressing further with that. And then also you'll see a consistent theme of quick wins. This is not about a strategy for 30 years time. This is a strategy for rapid delivery. So considering what we can be delivering over the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, so that we can make rapid improvements to the town as a whole, both the town centre and the surrounding residential areas. Next slide, please. And then South Farnham, we fully understand the problems that we have in Recklesham, including the issues of the railway bridge, the problems in the local community caused by the heavy traffic. So we'll be commencing soon work to investigate the potential feasibility of a bypass and what that might be able to achieve. Again, we have options here for improved walking and cycling because of the numbers of schools in the area and the real need to improve accessibility to schools and local facilities for people. We've looked at the station as well, and further work is going to be needed there to explore the role of the station as a major multimodal interchange, enabling people to connect not only by car, but also by cycling, potentially e-scooters and buses to train services at the station. But also it's very close to the town centre, and there are some real problems of severance. So we'll be looking at how we can tackle those issues of severance caused by the A31 and indeed the railway itself with better connections and better traffic management in the area. And as part of that as well, how we can better manage the traffic using the level crossing and reducing the problems caused by the barrier downtime there. Also, again, we've mentioned better bus routes, not only in Recklesham but across the wider South Farnham. And again, this theme of quick wins to help address the effects of speeding traffic. I'm sure many people here will be aware that traffic speeds have significantly gone up during lockdown, and there are some real issues for local communities that need to be addressed rapidly. Next slide, please. The A31, it's a critical issue for the town and indeed for the wider sub-regions. So there's a scheme at Hickley's Corner that's in the current programme with DFT for potential delivery over the next 5 to 10 years. The next step is to fully explore the potential options there, whether that be the existing underpass or alternative options for looking at how we can improve the traffic signals. All of those options are going to be on the table and assessed over the next few months, with the intention of determining a preferred blueprint by the middle of the year to take forward to DFT with a business case. And complementing that, we'd be looking at improvement packages at Coxbridge and Shepherd and Flock, because we know that obviously when you release the traffic at Hickley's, we don't want to be creating problems elsewhere. So we'd be looking at ensuring the whole of the corridor will work effectively. Next slide, please. And then Farnham wide, the intention here is that complementing the measures that I've already identified, we have a wide range of options to help improve and support people's travel choices. So including developing new apps, working with schools, and potentially more innovative options such as the options for hire of e-bikes and e-scooters. Those of you who have been to some other cities around the country will have seen these starting to bob around the cities in a highly effective and and cheap way of getting around towns and cities. So we'll be exploring that as a potential option. Next slide, please. So yes, that's a sort of a potted summary of the measures that we're proposing. I'm going to stop talking now because I want to listen to people's questions. So can I hand back to you, Wyatt, in terms of chairing the discussion?
Jonathan, of course you can, and thank you very much. I was interested in your view that quick views went out to 3 or 5 years. I think some of us and the councillors were thinking it was 6 months, and maybe this should have happened by now. Well,
sorry, when I say yes, quick wins within the next year, but realistically, some of the schemes are going to need a bit of design and a bit of time to actually build. But yes, that's a critical factor that we need to be thinking about, is how quickly these schemes can be delivered. I think the more I understand the technical issues, the more I understand why that's so needed. So thank you for that. Okay.
We're about to open up the big discussion for all of you, but some thoughts on, are we getting it right? What are the questions we'd like you to asking? So, what are your views on? Have we addressed the needs as you see it of businesses in the town? Perhaps you can give us some others. Do you support the proposed options? Are they the areas where we should go away now and investigate in depth, i.e. invest time and perhaps money in studies, traffic studies, transport studies, whatever? And then would the OIP encourage you personally, your employees, your customers, perhaps most important of all, to change their travel behaviour? Or are they always going to want a car park right next to the shop or the business that they're going to and stay that way? The thing I'd say to that, of course, is what Chris said earlier, is Farnham can't afford to change, otherwise it will just get gridlocked by all of the traffic. But is that your view? What are your insights for the future? I mean, you must be looking at your business and wishing, if this happened, I could do Y. So what are the things that we might be able to do that are on that wish list of making things happen? Will the OIP develop your business? Will changing the way the traffic flows be advantageous? And of course, reflect on what COVID might mean in terms of perhaps people that currently commute to London being around in Farnham during the day, perhaps having their offices local to home or at home. And will the sort of things we're doing improve Farnham as a destination town? We've now got World City Craft status. Does that mean people will come here? What sort of things should we be doing traffic-wise and pedestrian-friendly-wise to make sure people come here, or at least are not put off from coming here? And do you support the view that we should be encouraging more cyclists and pedestrians to be coming past your doors? Because statistically, at least, they generate more business. They're more inclined to stop for a minute and then pop into the shop or the outlet and buy something, or establish a trade they want in the future. And post-COVID, what next? Are we doing it? I'm sure there are going to be some different business aspects. I don't think commuting into an office to only meet face-to-face is the way of the world in the future. I think a lot of people of my generation have learned just how online and virtual meetings are so flexible and so useful to use. I think if you told me I was doing what I'm doing now 12 months ago, I would have said, no, that's well into the future. So what are your views, please? Let's open it up for discussion. We don't seem to have had many questions in the Q&A, so I assume people are going to raise their hands and indicate they'd like to join in. So if you see the yellow hand bar, perhaps you could lift your hand.
Right, Peter Goodman's asked a question. I was ready to ask a question.
Peter, where are you?
Yep, can you hear me okay?
You're a bit quiet.
Okay, I'll try and move a bit closer to the microphones. Is that any better?
It is.
Yeah, okay. I think most people would agree that businesses in Central Farnham are being strangled by the traffic. So giving shoppers and other business people and people who want to come into the town an extra option of how to get into the town.
Sorry, I missed that.
Unmute. Peter.
Sorry, Pete. Could you repeat that?
Hi, back again. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think everyone would agree that businesses are being strangled by the traffic. If we can give people an extra option, we can get more shoppers and workers into the town easily. So why is it going to be at least 3 years away before we get new things like new cycle tracks into the town centre? Why such a long time?
It's not. It's the quick wins. We will look at opportunities to do things quickly. We already have with HGVs. The order for that is going out on the 19th, next Friday. How long's Farnham been waiting for an HGV restriction? And this is for through HGVs, by the way, before anybody panics. We're also looking at road speeds, but we're also looking at quick wins we can get on cycle tracks. So Scholars Way through Farnham Park is a good example. We are looking at opportunities, and in fact, we've quite a long list that we're discussing tomorrow, in addition to what I've mentioned, that we're looking at that we can do for quick wins. The key, of course, is making sure that whatever we do now integrates going forward. What we can't afford, well, we wouldn't want to do, is to put something in place and then when we look to do more major works within the town centre, possibly that then becomes abortive work. So it's just getting the balance right, that's all. But we're certainly not waiting for a period of time. And as you know, we've spoken as well about what the art of the possible is in the short term.
Well, can I add something to that as well, please?
Paula.
I would like to just add to that, that we are currently in the consultation process for options and proposals. It only seems sensible to program to those interventions once we've agreed them, once we've refined them following this consultation, and once we've agreed what they look like, when we've looked at sort of the next level of detail, then we can communicate a more detailed program of activity as to when certain things can be achieved with everybody. So that is the next phase, and that's coming.
Pete.
But in the meantime, we can still do these one-off quick wins.
Pete, I hope you're getting sort of answers you were hoping for that. I know you're a keen on cycling being opened up in town. Something I've learned over the duration of this project, largely from Chris, is we've got to be aware and allow for unintended consequences. You know, it might be that it's obvious that we can hit a cycle route straight through a particular road that at the moment is closed because one end's blocked by the A31 or something of that nature. But of course, if the plan B for 2 or 3 years after that is perhaps to make that a road route or put a junction in there, clearly we don't want to be double or triple handling our projects. So appreciate that that means that while we're still sorting out what all the projects that we're going to do and what the times might be for that, you're going to get longer durations quoted by someone like Jonathan when he and I discussed quick wins just now, as opposed to someone like me or Stephen who wants a quick win to be yesterday. So thanks. Is that all right, Peter?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I don't personally think that an HGV ban or 20-mile-an-hour limits just in the town centre area are going to persuade people to jump on their bike from Lower Bourne, Rowledge, or even make the main parts of South Farnham to go into the town centre. They're going to wait until there's a cycle track covering most of their route. And according to the timescales published, that's 2024.
I think you're right. I think it does need those longer routes to be safe on the bike, not just a bit in the town centre. But I think 2024 is by then, not only until then. But Jonathan, did you want to come in?
Can I just cover the programme? You're right, Wyatt. It is indeed the completion by then. And as I mentioned on the LLF the other night, doing the local cycling and walking and implementation is the plan is a separate item which we are going to take forward in parallel with this programme. But we need to look at where we are intervening and how we are changing the road space to then design the cycle and walk network to fit with that and be a legitimate replacement. So it is a priority item in the programme, Peter, so you can be assured of that.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Well, it might be good to use the cycle and network that you were given based on the Department for Transport's tool, which has already been thoroughly researched, including with local knowledge from people that live in each of the different boroughs. For example, in Rowledge, they spoke to someone in Rowledge to work out where was the best place to put the cycle network. So a lot of the work's already been done for you. If you want to just look at it, it's up to you.
Yes, and we will be taking that on board as we develop the proposals over the next few months. So rest assured, we will be looking at that and making sure that it's taken into account.
That would be great, because I know that Borden, Aldershot, Guildford are all building cycle tracks as we speak. So if we can catch up, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we will.
The economic benefits are huge. Thanks.
Indeed, I mean, just to add, in terms of the, we're fully aware of the, the very, very large economic benefits that come with walking and cycling, particularly in terms of obviously the placemaking benefits, but also for people's health. So that will be a priority for attention as we move forward. Yeah,
and retail. It's you get a 49% boost in retail sales if you're on a cycle track. That's what research from the University of Birmingham has shown.
Yeah, so we're also very well aware of the evidence from organisations like Sustrans and Living Streets, and there are clear monetizable benefits from it. There's a report, for example, from Living Streets called the Pedestrian Pound, which really demonstrates the value to retailers and businesses of promoting easy pedestrian access, because there are significant cashable benefits to business from increasing pedestrian footfall.
Thanks.
Don't see another question with a hands up, but I did.
Damien's got a question, Wyatt. Damien Blower.
Then Damien, please come in.
Hello. Yeah, Damien Blower. I'm an architect and also a property owner. And one of the questions I've got is, what do you mean by businesses? This panel, today is for business, but I'm just thinking of, we've got landlords that own property, we've got tenants, we've got chains, national chains, we've got local business, or are we talking about people who run businesses whose employees are using the town? Could you just explain perhaps what you mean by business and who and how you categorize them and the voice that they should have in this panel, and also potentially what kind of businesses are we thinking we need to attract to make Farnham the resilient, successful town that we would like to see? So do they have a voice? Do we have an idea? Thank you.
Well, Damien, we're not restricting who comes in tonight and says they represent a business? I said earlier that it's not just the retail business, so there's a tendency to think in terms of their needs. And you know, I don't know what more we can do other than send out more free messages saying to people, please be here. We may well have conflicts of interest between different businesses. I mean, clearly, if we had such a thing like a garage in the middle of town, then restricting vehicle access would be the last thing they would want. But making a park and ride next door to a vehicle business would be ideal. I think Stephen Spence is wanting to come in on this. Stephen? Well, that does make a change. Thanks, Stephen. Anybody else would want to join me in answering Damien's question?
Ian might be able to give us a more definitive answer in terms of where the invites went out. I mean, you are perfectly right, Wyatt, in how you've described it. We don't restrict it. Anybody who feels they run a business, have a business in Farnham, whether that be a landlord, whether that be a retailer, whether that be a multinational, an office, we don't differentiate. But the original list comes from what Farnham holds, the town council holds. So I don't know, Ian, whether or not you want to add any more to that. You're muted at the minute. He's probably having his tea. No, hopefully.
I'm able to help. We invited as many businesses as we could within within Farnham. We sent an email out to people. We've hand delivered and posted leaflets to people. It's gone out through the Chamber of Commerce. We've worked with Waverley Borough Council to send information to all businesses on their list. So there's been information on social media as well and in press releases. So we really have tried to encourage as many people as we could to attend this evening.
And Claire saying that reminds me that we've also tried to approach the particular businesses of Farnham. We approached Crest Nicholson to see if they would come or send somebody that's representing what's their sales force in future businesses and how they might be attracted. And we made a particular approach, I think, to Marks and Spencer's, who are still the major organisation moving into the new development.
Yes, that's correct. We did.
Can I just add that I think Damien is making a really good point here, though, in that depending on the type of business and the way that retail and leisure and other businesses will return after COVID, we will need to have different solutions prepared for the town. And I think that's exactly why we like to seek your views on what we've suggested, but also tap into your insights around how you think your business will return post-COVID, if you have any thoughts on that, and how we can make allowances for that within our program. So the program team is very keen to hear on your insights of all types of businesses around how, from an economic perspective, we can support the success of Farnham businesses.
If I could maybe say something, Wyatt, if that's okay.
Of course, Andy.
Thanks, Wyatt. No, the thing I'd say is that perhaps it's a little bit disappointing we hadn't had a bigger response from businesses so far, but businesses are very, very busy right now with all their own problems, actually. And I think that's affected both the LLFs who had re-businesses. I think we'll get more engagement from businesses once we get to the next stage where we've got more specific proposals and they can see how it's going to affect them. So they will be continuing LLFs after we've got the elections out of the way, after the team has analysed all the responses to the initial consultations. And I think we'll maybe have more targeted approaches to businesses after that, and talking to them about how it will affect them. I think we'll get more engagement. So we haven't done well enough yet, but I think we'll have more opportunity later to do a bit better. Thanks, Wyatt.
I can give just a little bit of insight. I acted for a client who owns a restaurant chain that has one in Castle Street, very successful business. They have about 30 around the southeast. And the owner of the company, who was my client, did give me an insight, which was quite interesting. He said Farnham has a kind of density and depth of wealth that no other, not one other of his 29 restaurants matches. So Farnham has a kind of quite unique situation in that it has people who can afford to go out, 2 or 3 times a week and eat, and that's quite a, that is an opportunity for Farnham, because there's clearly a lot of disposable income, and in a town like Farnham where we're undergoing huge change in terms of the major chains. I mean, that business model is over, and a revolution is coming, and the retail market is going to change. You're going to have much more active landlords that are investing in their premises. You're going to need a more active and engaged local government that is prepared to invest in the public space in order to support the businesses that want to invest in their buildings. I mean, you go to most major cities, certainly London, and the quality of retail space is very high. You go around the secondary locations around London, and it's Formica, it's PVC, it's cheap plywood. Most of these units have barely been touched in 50 years. There's a massive underinvestment, and landlords just haven't invested in the town centre retail. But Farnham can't afford to continue in that way. I mean, we have to make a more attractive town centre in order to make the most of the wealth that is there, and the status quo is not acceptable. So for all the people complaining about the potential problems that might accrue from pedestrianisation, the alternative is a dying town. So I would beg, both as a business owner and a property owner, I would beg the OIP to proceed at haste, at speed, to prepare Farnham for the revolution that's about to happen and pedestrianise the town, to prejudice the driver and encourage pedestrians and cyclists, people to want to come to the town and spend the disposable income they clearly have. Thank you.
Damien, thank you very much. I think you'll find a number of us agree with you exactly that the status quo can't simply be left to rumble on. And then I'll be delighted to see the feedback you give us, perhaps in writing if you've got time, to our process, although you have only got until Sunday. Did anybody else want to come in, or can we move on to the next question? Perhaps we can bring in Toby Reynolds. Toby, I believe you've got a question.
I do, and can you hear me, Wyatt?
Yes, Toby.
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for your time this evening. Very much agree with a lot of what the previous gentleman said. And I don't know if I'm necessarily making a point or if it's a question, but obviously within the local area, there are case studies with regards to pedestrianisation, looking at somewhere like Leatherhead, Godalming, looking at potentially Guildford and park and ride schemes. All of these things are, I think, fantastic concepts. I'm just, and I am definitely not a town planner, and I don't know the economics behind it. But you take Leatherhead, people say to me, it's a ghost town of what it used to be. Now, I'm sure that's a combination of a variety of reasons, but perhaps pedestrianisation hasn't helped. So all I'm looking for, I guess, is some reassurance that these case studies have been looked at, and there is some proper insight into these changes being made, and actually they will create a positive economic impact. And sorry, if I may, that sort of a second point to that is that obviously there are some supermarkets, and why I think you did just mention with regards to the supermarkets, there are some supermarkets, there are some big retailers there. There's the Elfix as well. All these people, I would be quite interested to hear their insights into the proposed plans as well, if that's available. Thank you.
Toby, that last line, so would I, and it's just a shame we don't seem to have one of them come in on the conversation. I'm hoping Paula might be able to come in and elucidate on her attempts to speak to some of the big businesses around the town centre. You talked about pedestrianisation and those case studies where they've looked at them. From what I know about the people we've got round here today, in Paula, Jonathan, Alex, and most of it all, Chris, these people were working on many of those projects, not just looking at them and reading up on them. If you want some background from them, then we'll try and squeeze that in as well, if that's what you'd like, Toby.
It may be useful, Jonathan, Alex. We've got some national studies that have been done as well as local. I think headlines are a bit difficult. I always forget the figures, but am I right in assuming that since the early 2000s, there's been nationally something like a 27% drop in footfall generally across the UK? And then the figures that I saw where pedestrianisation had taken place, there was a 7% increase in footfall. Now, those are general figures, so individual circumstances may differ, but those were the sort of figures that I understood. So basically there is a fall in footfall, but where we pedestrianise, and this is assuming we pedestrianise, everybody jumps to the conclusion we're going to pedestrianise everything, but that's all part of this process. Is there any more you want to add on that?
I think there's quite a lot, Chris, and I think Jonathan's alluded to a really great repository of data, which is the research that's conducted by Living Streets, which is called the Pedestrian Pound, and it was a study that looked right the way across the UK, and most of the case studies are in the UK, but there are also some international examples, and this research was an independent study undertaken by a firm called Just Economica. So it looked at a load of academic research, but also case studies where schemes have been implemented, and you're quite right in the allusion that you've made that overall the sort of macro trend is for a fall in footfall across the UK, but as you say, where interventions are done well, that trend has reversed and they've seen an upswing, and that can be pedestrianisation, but it can also be other measures in terms of improvements to the public realm. It doesn't have to be to the exclusion of vehicles in their entirety. It could be pedestrian priority zones or just improving the quality of the fabric and the environment. And there are some great data sets. I can ream through some if people want, but I can also make the link available for people to read through that in their leisure, and it might help to give a bit of a flavour as to some of the boons that can be delivered in terms of increasing footfall, but also the spending power that pedestrians and cyclists, when they come in greater volumes, bring to a town.
Yeah. If you could, Alex, that would be really helpful. But I would also add that clearly following the last year, there are going to be some real existential challenges for high streets and town centres across the country. But I think all the evidence is showing that those towns that have a distinctive offer and are not, go beyond just a simple retail offer, that actually offer a quality experience in terms of, the opportunities to eat and drink, as colleagues have just mentioned, to actually go out to take advantage of the distinctiveness of Farnham with its World Craft City status, and places like the Maltings. Actually, Farnham's in a great place in terms of having that underlying offer to bring people into the town. There's going to be a real challenge for some of the clone towns around the country, by the way, and there's plenty of towns across the southeast that are going to be facing some real challenges from their limited town centre offer. Farnham's got a great offer in terms of the mix of uses and obviously the disposable income, but what I would add is you've actually got to create a place that people want to be walking around in and moving, sort of accessing the different facilities. It's no good if people can't physically or easily get from Brightwells over to Downing Street. It's just not going to be attractive. You've got to create the physical environment in which people are going to want to circulate around the town centre. Otherwise, there's going to be a huge opportunity missed there. So we've got to get that right balance in terms of creating the high quality of the public realm and encouraging people to walk and circulate around the town centre to really maximise the potential there.
And I'd just like to add that there is a lot of thought leadership out there at the moment around what retail and leisure return will look like. And there is a lot of thought around the fact that leisure will be the saviour of high streets in the shorter run, and Farnham lends itself very nicely to that, as well as boutique shopping, arts and crafts related sort of offering. These are things that are strong in Farnham, and these sorts of sessions are an opportunity for businesses to tell us the areas that we can grab onto as part of our infrastructure program and enable that. So the ask, I think, to the audience is please do engage and please do share your thoughts so that we can think about them and enable them as part of our program.
Thank you, team. Was there anything else you wanted to come back on there, Toby?
Well, I don't think so at this stage. Just to appreciate everyone's comments and insight into what everything, some reassurance that things are being looked at. I mean, if any, I don't know if there are other questions that are being asked at the moment, but and you did mention right at the beginning, I think you thought some questions might be asked with regards to parking. And again, I've had a look at the storyboards, the 10 boards, but bringing some of the parking decisions to life would be helpful. Some people, again, have sort of referenced that there's not enough current parking in Farnham, and I'd just like to understand if we go pedestrianised or partial or whatever it's going to be, then again, sort of reassurance that there's going to be potentially more parking, that people can be on the outskirts but close enough to access the town.
I think you could be absolutely assured of that. Indeed,
yeah.
Get people to change behaviours. We're going to have to introduce the new parking before we almost block the old parking, or perhaps use it for something else. Jonathan, I heard you say yep, so you must want to add to that.
Well, what I would also add is that we've done some analyses looking at parking accessibility into the town centre, and virtually all of the town centre is accessible from at least 2 car parks. So there's a multiplicity of car parks that are serving the the town centre core. So actually, you can get to the borough from at least 3 different car parks across the town centre within 5 minutes. The walking accessibility from the different car parks in the town centre is incredibly high. In fact, much more so than most of the other towns that I've worked in. So what I would emphasise is that there's a very high level of parking availability in Farnham compared with other comparable towns in Surrey and around the country. So what I would say is that yes, when we're looking at how we better manage parking, we're not saying that we're going to stop people parking and stop people getting into the town centre. It's just how can we make better use of the that space, because it's valuable space, and how can we actually enable people to park as easily as possible. And as I said earlier, one of the real difficulties is the fact that the one-way gyratory system is actually forcing people onto maybe to use car parks that they don't necessarily could be using or should be using. So actually looking at parking in tandem with the town centre road layout to actually get people parked in the best car park to service their needs.
Can I just, there's been a couple of questions, Jonathan, that actually tags on to what you've just been saying. David Howell has talked about one of the proposals for deliveries to shops and businesses. And I know that's been raised as well on the Q&A. And Lucy Wills has asked a question about making sure that disabled and elderly people can still access the centre. My immediate response to both of those is, of course, we will allow for that. We're not going to consider moving car parks out of the town centre that then impacts on people that have mobility issues, or even impacts on shops getting their deliveries made. But it's about how we can better do that. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that.
No.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
If I was being called in there. So please, if somebody else was about to speak, please.
Lucy, it is you next, so please, yes, come in.
Oh, no, thank you. I partly grew up in the area, and I've returned here to sort of base my business because of the positive aspects that you said. And I'm delighted that this work is going ahead to both reduce traffic and also to make the most of the natural resources that we have, and as well as the local businesses and enterprise. I think that it's important to consider mobility in terms of people moving around, but accessibility, in my understanding, is also about making spaces welcoming for people and people who have cognitive impairments and other issues that might prevent them from accessing spaces. So it can be anything, sometimes if a place has loud echoey noises, that can be difficult for people. So it's also about considering signage and how people move through a space. And I also made a point about as my business is involved around healthcare and wellness, but it's also very technology based. And I know that there's some brilliant technology businesses around here who are also working remotely and, you know, doing things at a national scale, but working from Farnham. And I'm just thinking, you know, how can we join the dots and enable more people to work from home and using transport less, but at the same time elevate those businesses and support them better, so that we have, you know, we can really build on local successes and, you know, use what we've learned during lockdown about how powerful remote business can be, and actually apply that in this area to, like, I mean, the increase in traffic over the past 5 years has just been unbelievable. I actually don't drive because of health issues. So I'm very much aware of the public transport issues here, and the potential to bring back more public transport. Where I am here in just outside Rowledge, there used to be a bus every half hour. Now there's 4 buses each way a day. And I'm not saying we should necessarily bring back more buses, but it's just trying to work out how we can actually unwind some of what's happened. And I think if we can find a way forward that doesn't penalise businesses and helps people get around, but also protects the natural environment, and it's such a beautiful area to live in. It's extraordinary, and we've got so many visitors as well. And I just wanted to stress the importance of tourism, both here and around the Surrey Hills. And I think that's just in its beginning phases, really. I don't think we've begun to tap the potential, especially with people having holidays closer to home. So I just wanted to paint that picture and add that in as my perspective. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's loads there, isn't there, for us to reflect on, Lucy? There is absolutely loads.
I've been thinking about this for a while.
That final point about tourism, I mean, we picked up on that, and perhaps it doesn't come through strongly enough in the OIP, but, you know, we figured that, for example, with the South Downs Way and how we can connect that in with the, you know, the historical and heritage offer that there is. So there's a huge amount that we can do there. I think your points about, you know, how tech can contribute, there's a huge amount there that we can think about in terms of the role of the, you know, the tech industry in actually making things better, and how can we channel the energies of local tech professionals in doing things. I've just put a thing in the Q&A response actually to you, Lucy, in terms of, so for example, you know, there's huge potential for tech to solve some of the problems that we're looking at, and other parts of the country are exploring this through what they call future transport zones. So I mentioned e-scooters, and so I live in an area with e-scooters at the moment, and we sort of have a bit of debate as to whether it's just a niche thing or whether it could actually become a mainstream mobility solution. My view is actually it could. But solutions also things like, you know, new apps in terms of helping people to really understand the travel choices that are available. We've got, where I live, there's a whole ecosystem of different SMEs working in sort of startup units in containers and so on, actually developing stuff like this. And it's amazing to see the kind of energies that come with that. So I think that's something really we should be looking to explore more.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I look forward to having further conversations and seeing where it goes.
So yeah, Lucy, we've covered the line. Sorry, I overshot Wyatt there, but if you could drop us a line in the team, that would be brilliant.
Absolutely.
Lucy, I really appreciate you seeing your feedback coming in writing, and it will make sure the project team don't forget anything. Not that they would intentionally, that would they? Alex, I do want to move on, so is it very quick?
It is, yeah. I was just going to say to cover off Lucy's question that we didn't cover, which was around making it accessible for all. That's an absolute guarantee. You know, we'll be working collaboratively on that because we've got a duty to. We've got personally some technology that allows designers to work in, you know, 3D that can see what the visual effect of certain designs is for those with different visual impairments. So technology like that is a great way to visualize and see how the space looks to people who perceive the world differently. So definitely we'll be looking at that.
Thanks, Alex. I am aware we've got quite a few people looking to ask questions. I thought I had Max Lyons. I know I've got Jerry Hyman and Tim Clark and George Murray coming back for a second question. Max, are you still in on the phone or the meeting? If not Max, then we'll move to Jerry Hyman. Jerry, remember what I said about it being brief, please?
Am I on?
Yes, Jerry, you are.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, I have run businesses in Farnham for the past 25 years. I've dealt with many businesses over that time, and talked to them also. Certainly also since I've been a councillor and before I set up Farnham Residents and brought air quality and everything onto the agenda, so which this has come from. I am concerned actually that you know, as you're so keen to ensure that councillors and the people who have brought us here aren't really given an opportunity to speak. We haven't had any input ourselves to this, which is a concern. I also have some concerns about the OIP, but if I just perhaps as briefly as possible summarise what I've gleaned and what we've done from all of my talking to businesses and residents over the past 25 years. Everybody wants better pedestrian conditions in Farnham. We're all agreed that everybody wants that. That's not a problem at all. But for the past 25 years, everybody with any sense has also said that it's got to be alternative routes first, because we have to keep the town accessible, as a number of the people who are on this call have said. Then it's alternative routes first, and I think that's the issue where we're having difficulty with people, because they see this perhaps as you know, that Surrey County Council have, as a number of people in Farnham know, for the past 25 years been trying to bring in road space reallocation without modelling, without alternative routes first. And as we heard at Monday's LLF, Castle Street residents have a great deal of anxiety, and a lot of people who live in the town and around the town have a lot of anxiety that they won't be able to get about the town anymore. We will have to give up our cars, walk everywhere or cycle everywhere, or try to do our shopping on electric scooters or whatever, whilst nobody else in the world will have these restrictions upon them, and they'll just gridlock the town. I think it's important to
Jerry, do you have any new points? Because these have been raised before and answered before.
Well, I don't think they have actually. I mean, the issues weren't answered on Monday. You've asked for views on the OIP itself. I've read all of it and the draft. It doesn't really start from where we are, because obviously where we are at the moment is that the Brightwell scheme has consent for roads plans which aren't in this. So we're not starting from where we are, but that's being talked about. Yet that will require changing to the phasing, Section 73 application, changes to Section 106 and 278 agreements there. We're meant to have had a park and stride
all
study.
that's in hand.
Can we be told what the result of the study that was meant to be done at commencement of the street development in respect to park and stride study? Has that been conducted? And
who's park and stride study? We're not at that stage of detailed studies into park and stride.
I think there was, Wyatt, I think as part of the Brightwell development, there was a Section 106 fund to do a park and stride study. And I think that's what Jerry's referring to.
I am, thank you.
And Jerry, I picked that up, and I have checked with the teams involved with Brightwells, and I am currently been told that work didn't actually go forward, as in the design work wasn't done. So when I have more information on it as to where that is, I'll definitely let you know. But if you've got specific questions, please ask us specific questions, particularly related to the business issues that we're discussing this evening.
This is exactly, yes, it's all to do with business, because it's to do with accessibility and the access to businesses. This is everything that this is about, isn't it? I think it was Wyatt who said that we have to be careful of unintended consequences, and this goes to the issue of modelling and trialling anything that we're bringing in before we do it. I think there's an awful lot of concern that what we've got in place at the moment, which is effectively the equivalent of parking a dozen vans in Downing Street and the borough. Obviously, everybody knows that that's the problem, and we're being told that it's the solution at the same time. So we've got that contradiction, and what we need is the modelling. We've got the 2019 results from data from the Northbrook Park development, I think is what Surrey have got, because we can't validate that model until we've got traffic, that amount of traffic running around again, because you have to test it by driving vehicles across. That's how you validate a base model in the Pramix. So we don't have a model to start with. So although I agree with what Damien said before, everybody wants improved pedestrian conditions, but we do need people to be able to get into the town in their cars. My problem is that we can't do this fast because, it's a question, can we do this? Because we haven't got a base model to work from. We haven't got a validated base model to work from. When are we going to have that so that we can start testing some solutions? Because we all in business, everybody wants solutions. We don't want a year of talking about it. We're back to where we were prior to 1985 at the moment. In 1985, we had a load of solutions in front of us in the local plan consultation.
Jerry, can I stop you for a second to answer the question you've said? Okay, so as I explained at the start of this session, the OIP has currently made a number of suggestions and proposals. We're waiting to hear from everybody. We're then going to absorb that and then come up with detailed steps and milestone for how we're going to take those forward, conduct further modelling, apply the strategic modelling. So we have got professionals here in Jonathan and Alex who completely understand the how you do transport modelling and how you apply it. So if we could please rely on them to pick up that piece. But in terms of when, by the next board, we're going to have a detailed programme of the next steps. So I hope that answers your question.
No, I mean, the question is, how soon can we have a modelling, a model that's been validated, a base model in front of us, so that we can start looking at solutions? Because until that happens, if that's going to be 2 or 3 years away, please be straight with people and say, well, obviously we can't do this. We'll take out the COVID measures now because we know that we are not going to be able to, because this is a big concern to people.
Jerry, it only seems to be you that wants to do nothing and has these concerns. Now,
well, aren't I the person who brought this forward?
But yet again, you seem to be a minority voice that wants to hog the limelight.
Excuse me, I haven't had an opportunity to speak over 11 meetings, have I? And I haven't
Jerry,
had a question
the answer to your question is that the team, once we've absorbed the OIP, we're going to have the next step around what modelling we're going to do. The strategic model for Surrey County Council will be ready in June. Then we can reassess what the next transport modelling steps look like. And I'll make sure that you know about the detail of those steps when we come to that. Just bear with us whilst we work out the next steps at the moment.
Jonathan, can I just ask? My understanding was, and I don't quite understand Jerry's view on this, but my understanding was the Northbrook data was put into the Pramix model, and that has actually been verified.
Yes, it has, and I really must correct you on this. The model that we have for the town, which is a 2019 base, has been validated based on ANPR surveys that were done in 2019, and the flows and the journey times have been validated. It is regarded, it is treated by transport modelling experts as a validated model and as a robust basis for the assessment of schemes in Farnham. And indeed, one of the next steps over the next couple of months is going to be using that existing model to explore what the impacts of different changes in traffic management arrangements would be in the town centre. What I would also say is that no model is perfect. Because if you try building a perfect traffic model, it would take you 5 years and it would be out of date before you could actually use it. So there has to be some degree of pragmatism in these things. We cannot make perfection the enemy of the good. We have to be, there has to be a certain degree of pragmatism in how we do things, but at the same time, sufficient robustness to enable us to make, sensible and robust and evidence-based decisions. So what I suggest is that we take that offline in terms of having a more detailed exploration of the modelling work. But there is a traffic model there. It is validated, and it is going to be used to actually help us to inform the forward strategy. But there will be further work taking place over the next year to develop the more detailed model that will be needed for the major schemes such as Hickley's Corner. Hopefully that answers that.
It's also right to say we've two schemes running at the minute, the HGV restrictions and the speed studies, neither of which rely on the model, because it's fairly evident and straightforward from information that we've got what volumes of vehicles run through Farnham that don't actually deliver to Farnham, and just using it as a shortcut to get from the M3 down to the A31 to cut that corner off. So, there are things that can be done. You don't need a model to do those sort of things. You don't need a model to do speed restrictions. So there are things we can do. Yes, I agree. As soon as you start looking at reducing lanes and improving footways, that's a different kettle of fish. And that's when the model comes to the fore. I have to say, Jerry, if you can produce as a traffic model that replicates what drivers do, because we're all individuals, you will make an utter fortune, because it is not a science, but it is the best we've got and the best we can use, because there isn't perfection here, because it relies on us and we're not perfect. And I'm taking the wider us here. I'd be the first to say my driving habits change according to the conditions, as most people do.
Okay, Jerry, I think you've had lots of answers or attempts to answer your questions. Can I ask if you've got further questions? You put them in writing. As you said, as a councillor, you had an opportunity for everybody else looking at a draft OIP. You've been to several of the other OIPs aimed at the general public. I'm amazed you don't think they've been answered already. But we do have other people waiting. Indeed, some people have dropped off the list by the time we've taken. Tim Clark, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Tim.
Oh, good. Thank you very much for the presentations and the explanation. I think Jerry's concerns are the reflections of what a lot of people were worried about in Farnham, and people do worry about changes. I work in Germany, as I think some of you know, and I've met the team before, and I'm very impressed with the way the team has put together the OIP, especially since it's got lots of good pictures. It's always good to have illustrations so that people can understand, how things do look and how they could look. And I think we do need, as somebody raised before, a place to go in town. At the moment, I've seen people in town just running the gauntlet across the traffic. It's really horrendous. It's people with children, people falling over, old people holding up lines of traffic. It's really worrying. We shouldn't be doing that. So I endorse the point that we do need to create a place for people to go. And I call it an enclave. It could be a small enclave or a large enclave, but a place where people can say, oh, there is Farnham. That's somewhere I can be comfortable and enjoy the town in some way. So in fact, I'm just endorsing more of what Damien said earlier on, which I think made the very important point, which is that we do need to put a priority towards pedestrians. And then the other theme is that the place in town that we have doesn't have many people actually in it that actually really live there and really enjoy the place. And I think there's an opportunity in the town centre to use upper floors of shops much more efficiently and for accommodation. We do have a major housing challenge in Farnham, and I think that by bringing people into the town centre in living spaces above shops would help businesses, and it would also help people to perhaps identify an affordable home. And I do think the focus on business tonight is a very useful and a very important focus that we shouldn't forget, because basically the economy of Farnham is reliant on the success of its businesses. So that's my brief comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Certainly many of us are aware of the opportunity for living above retail premises in town. Indeed, one of the earlier speakers we had on tonight lives in such a location. And of course, Brightwells, for all its evils in many ways, will bring new residents into the centre of town. But let me bring in my colleagues. Did any of you want to come in on that? Chris, you don't have your mic on.
I think it's a valid suggestion from Tim there, Wyatt, and it's something that we've embedded in other schemes that we've delivered nationally, whether they've been big cities like London, small towns. It is crucial and it is best practice to integrate rest points, places for people to pause, enjoy the space, carve out some space for people to just experience the town. So we'll be integrating that alongside improvements to green infrastructure as a crucial metric for both people's enjoyment, but also their physical, emotional, mental health and well-being. So all of those will be swept up in some of the improvements that we'll propose when we get to the more detailed stage of design.
And I think it's also reflected, Tim, in our vision, because one of our key themes is about placemaking for communities and making the place attractive and responsive to how the communities want to use that place. So you've made a great point, but I think it's very well established and well threaded into the OIP, and it's a key focus. So hopefully we'll make you move back from Germany soon.
Stephen.
I was just going to say, I think the points that Tim and Damien and Lucy, amongst others, were making are extremely important. I mean, nothing has changed for 50 years. Despite all of the reports that have been written, we have got the opportunity to make that change. In my world, I'd probably categorize some of the stuff that's being talked about as Green New Deal. The very interesting thing is that that's being supported across all of the groups in Surrey County Council, certainly, and I think the other county councils. So there's quite a somebody's got their mute off. So
go into it.
Sorry, I can't hear because somebody else is talking. Okay. That's finished now. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So there's a commonality of view that something needs to be done. I mean, the point that's being raised about it has to be done properly. Absolutely, of course. The Brightwells issue, which I just want to say a little bit about and then I'll stop. As you know, there are conversations that are going on about Brightwells, including people in the town talking about a plan B if the commercial rents don't come through in the levels that are expected. And, the university, Watts Gallery, the cinema, the Maltings, if there could be some kind of cultural hub in there that then is linked and connected to the rest of the town with some of these things that we're talking about cycle paths and more room for pedestrians and so forth, you start to make Farnham cook. And that's where that tourist issue that Lucy was talking about as well comes up, because I get lots of friends of mine who come here for 2 or 3 days from Australia and they say, this town is fantastic. You can go to the castle, you can go to the museum, you can go to the shops, but your traffic's awful. So if we can deal with that traffic issue, and that's obviously what we're trying to do, then I think there are all kinds of possibilities for Farnham in the future. And I think this conversation tonight has been a very positive one, a very good one with some of the input people have made.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll move on unless there was something else there, Tim. George Murray wanted to come back in with a second question. George, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Wyatt. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's my first question. It's not my second question. But
oh yes, I wanted to bring you in over your station car park question. So you're on my notes for the wrong reason. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I thought that's quite a nice idea. All it is some steps from the back of the station car park up to either up to the approach road or up to Vergrove Hill, so that people who are coming don't have to walk down that little road of approach road with no path in the dark. If there's just some stairs there, they can get in and out of the car park very easily once they've parked or whatever. So that's just a simple question. I know it's owned by the station and they have to do it, but that would be quite a simple one. But my bigger thing, and I'm fully supportive of the OIP, and I think what you're doing is a great job. And I really hope, like everybody else does, is that it can be fast-tracked and get on with. I've lived in Farnham for 20 years. I own the coffee shop in Lion and Lamb Yard. And people who know Lion and Lamb Yard would say that that is everything what Farnham should be. Pedestrianisation, heritage. It also has people living in flats above it. There's lots of people living in it. So it's a mixed-use thing. And it's a really, really successful place. And especially this summer when people could sit outside and eat, it was an absolutely wonderful place to be. It's not a panacea, though, for everything, because 50% of the shops and businesses in Lion and Lamb Yard are not open. They're empty, and they're looking for businesses to fill them. So, you know, I'm a realist, and I know this is a temporary thing with COVID, and the place looks desolate. I'm doing takeaway at the moment, so it's absolutely desolate at the moment. But I'm optimistic about the future. I know as soon as we can get the COVID restrictions over, people will be coming back and they'll be sitting outside, and it'll all be wonderful again. But I am concerned about the long term of all these empty shops and all the empty businesses and whether they'll come back. And the government have been great. The government support which they've given to small businesses has been absolutely vital and has worked great for me. I've survived. But how Farnham and how these businesses are going to come back strong and how they're going to be like in 2022, that's the worry I've got, with people's debts and rent arrears and business rates, all these things coming back. It's going to be a long, long struggle. And I don't want you to work, you know, obviously what you're doing is not involved in that specifically, but I can't look at what you're doing without me thinking, okay, well, this is my business, you know, my business and the people who are around me in Lion and Lamb Yard, and how are they going to cope in the next year. So that's just my vision of it and how I'm feeling. Maybe I haven't articulated it particularly well, but I do fully support what you people are doing to improve Farnham, and I think it will do a really good job. And if you want to have a gold standard of what a good development should be, then the Lion and Lamb Yard is brilliant. Thank you.
George, that's great. I share your view largely the Lion and Lamb Yard, so I won't accuse you of any bias on that one at all. There is a specific answer to the point about the station car park. As you rightly pointed out, it's owned by the station. One of our predecessors, Pat Frost, specifically went to the station people with a plan to open up steps at the far end and allow pedestrians to walk through the car park, and the station or Network Rail or whoever blocked it. I think they blocked it on the grounds of liabilities that they would be opened up to, allowing pedestrians to walk through their car park. The fact that it's an awful lot safer than walking around the side of it down the
approach road
way seemed to be lost, and I can't believe that the councils couldn't have found a way around that. But that's where it was last time. I'd be delighted if this team could take that on again in the bigger discussions we're going to have. But maybe, of course, some of that issue will go away on some of the alternative schemes. So let's add it to our shopping list for discussions, the station car park station area. Lion and Lamb. George, even if it's not to do with highways, you can still write to Andy, Stephen or I, or if you think it's more a borough council issue, one of the borough councillors, and say, hey, what about you doing this? You know, if you think there's some means that Surrey County Council could introduce something, subsidise something, you know, dare I say, put orcas up the centre to a bit of a joke to attract people, I'll definitely carry that forward and see what we can do. You know, if Lion and Lamb's 50% occupied only, I dread to think what the rest of Farnham looks like. I didn't see Lion and Lamb that bad myself, but perhaps I wasn't doing as good accounting as you get to do each day. I've seen a few nods from my colleagues. Did any of you want to come in? Chris, you're not on, so.
Thanks, Wyatt. Yes, just to add to what you've said and what I'd said to George, I'll take it on board. As you rightly say, it isn't our car park or Waverley's. When I say ours, I'm taking the wider Farnham, Waverley, Surrey. But we are in discussions with Network Rail. So, you know, let's see what the art of the possible is. I'd already got on my quick win list because we've walked along station approach. It's private. It's actually Network Rails. But having a footway on there would be a good idea. We would love to adopt that, to take it on board, and then there are certain things we can do, not necessarily with the steps, but certainly about footways and so on. So would fully endorse what you've said, and I'd take on board what George has said. The only other comment is, yes, we have to be minded that coming out of COVID, I'm not totally as convinced that things won't get back to some form of what was pre-COVID normality. However, I know what will happen is there are certain chains that ain't going to appear again. Probably chains that were already shaky. So there are a number of empty units, and unfortunately, the move is definitely to online. You know, we only got to look at who's bought out Arcadis. They're online players. They're not high street. They don't want high street shops. So we've got to take account of that. There's no point in having this fantastic public realm and this fantastic Farnham if it's as dead as a dodo because there's no shops there. So everything we are doing will be focused as well on ensuring that, you know, we can do what we can do to help the economy and particularly help businesses.
Chris, just to say, nobody's bought Arcadis. People have bought Arcadia. Shopping.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Oh,
Arcadis is
Arcade, that was a rumour. I didn't want to spread that rumour.
Do you think he had some news for you, Paul?
Shaky then. Sorry, Arcadia. Yes, not Arcadia. Too many A's in the place. Apologies.
So the ladies from Arcadis, do you want to comment? I'll take that as no. Paul, anybody else want to comment on?
If I could comment, why
of course you can, Andy.
Is there any attendee questions at the moment? Just on one or two of the things I said about the station approach road. Actually, it would be excellent if it could become a proper public road, part of Surrey's road network. And as it happens, the land on the other side of the station approach road from the station car park, I believe, is mainly owned by Surrey County Council. So there is room on that side to widen the road and create a pavement. If I'm correct about that, it probably needs to be fully checked out because land ownership is sometimes a bit unclear. But I'm pretty certain that it's owned by Surrey. The other thing is that if you made that a public road, it would be ideal to actually, towards the other end of it from Fairgrove Hill, to go left of the Mulberry, behind the Mulberry pub, and connect with Hickley's Corner, so you don't have to drive through the Station forecourt. In fact, that was actually part of the original Hickley's Corner scheme that would happen. It's on the model that was produced at the time. So that was a general comment I wanted to make. And another general comment I'd like to make actually is, as nobody else has put their hand up at the moment, I think we're all agreed with the direction of travel, you know, you know, improving the town centre in terms of for pedestrians and shoppers and so on. And that's really got to happen, but there is barriers to that, particularly the effect that has, as one or two people have said, in people moving around the town. So we've got to actually bring the population along with us. You know, whether we can have alternative routes before we do all that, I'm not totally certain, but we may need mitigation, you know, and because we've got to think of the people in North Farnham. We've got to think about the fact that if we totally pedestrianise the centre of the town, you very clearly throw some extra traffic onto the Upper Hill Road and onto the bypass. So that's part of all what you expert guys have got to work out, and I've got every confidence in you'll be able to do it. And it's not simple, it's not easy, but it's actually got to be done for the future of the town, because the town, in my opinion, will deteriorate if we don't actually solve the centre of the town problem. But although I'm the councillor responsible for the town centre, for Central Farnham, I'm very, very aware of the feelings of people in North Farnham and South Farnham and so on, that all of their, and places like Webben and Bagshot Lee, that see themselves as not being too much thought about. So we've got to think about all of that. And I know you guys will do that, actually. So that's just some general comments to take up time until somebody else puts their hand up.
And Andy, sorry, I didn't realize Wyatt was asking me earlier, so hence I stayed quiet. But you made a very good point right at the start around station approach and the area surrounding the station. I wanted to let you know that we are speaking to Network Rail at the moment, and we're going to be looking at station approach closely and how to make the area around the station more accessible, more attractive, and also guide people across to Brightwells, guide people across through a sensible route to access the town.
Yeah, that's excellent. And that will help with the barrier problems, actually. If you make the station approach road a proper road, less people will have to go across the level crossing, actually, which will help. So thanks for that, Paula. That's really good news.
I think we're giving that a really good answer. Paula, thanks for coming in. Sorry if I didn't make my hint earlier obvious enough. I'll try harder if I ever get another time. But we have
we've got a question from
If you let me finish, Chris, please. We've had a really good question come in from Sylvia Schuler.
Just going to say.
I'll simply read it out. I've had Claire Kennett want to come in. Jonathan, I know you and Chris want to come in. I'll perhaps try and toss a coin between which of I bring in first, but since Claire hasn't answered anything, I suspect her focus from town will come first. But let me read it up. And it says, hi, we own the bookshop at the Borough and we love your ideas, One question, deliveries. We have many of those during the 7 days a week when open. Since the lockdown and the COVID road measures, we have experienced difficulties with deliveries. Apologies in advance, my mic is not working. Happy to just listen if you can answer. Thank you. Well, Sylvia, I've read it out. I hope I've given the emphasis where you wanted it. And Claire Kennett, are you there to give us a bit of an answer, perhaps from a local point of view, before I let the big guns in? Thanks, Claire.
I think it might be better for other members of the team to answer this question because I'm not actually local. So I don't know whether Ian's around. He's got a much better local knowledge.
Well, let's start with Chris and Jonathan, and if you or Ian want to come in, we can do that. Or Ian, are you ready to speak?
No, just sorry for that, Wyatt. It was Sylvia's question I was going to mention. Jonathan, do you want to just give an overview of what you found when we did the HGV study? Although we were looking at HGVs, what we found re-deliveries and the sort of thought process that we've got for that?
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview and then I'll sort of hand over to Alex in terms of the specifics. What we found was that since the introduction of obviously over the last year, we've had quite a big reduction in car traffic during 2020, but similar levels of HGVs over the last year, obviously managing those deliveries and meeting essential needs. So there is certainly a perception in the town that obviously HGVs are quite prominent because obviously the percentage in the traffic mix. I think that Sylvia's raised the point about obviously with the introduction of the COVID measures, the challenges in managing deliveries. So one of the options that we're looking at as part of the quick wins is how we can better deal with deliveries within the COVID with the COVID measures in place. Alex, is there anything that you'd like to add to that, and then perhaps we can just give a brief overview of, you know, some of the alternatives that we're thinking about in terms of how we can rationalise just the sheer number of HGVs that are making deliveries in the town centre.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think one of the sort of intermediate steps that won't take too long to deliver is, you know, if we're looking at potential footway widening, then that's a great opportunity to combine that with timed loading pads that are on the footway, so that, you know, in the morning when there's not so much footfall from pedestrians accessing the town, those spaces are off carriageway so they don't block through traffic. That's a safe place for vehicles to load and unload for those that do need local access. And then in the afternoon, that reverts over into additional pedestrian space when you've got high footfall. So that's one of the measures we're looking at. And then, as Jonathan has alluded to, we're also looking at slightly longer term measures for where we can look to consolidate freight further out away from the town centre, so that those HGVs aren't clogging up the streets, but the deliveries can still be made to businesses that rely upon them. So that those kind of measures will definitely assist. And, you know, we can go into a bit more detail if that hasn't quite covered the question, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so I just add to the point there as well. The Sylvia, you know, at the moment there is no loading and unloading between 8 and 6 in the borough. So during the COVID measures, there has been additional space that's been made available there. And exactly as Alex has just said, there may well be more opportunity going forward if the footways are widened on a more permanent basis, which is one of the aspirations that has been coming forward from many people. Success of deliveries and success of businesses in the town is vital for the future. So that's something that the team has been very much focused on. And so I think, well, I hope you can get reassurance that a lot of the measures that are being put forward are very much business focused. But we can take that forward further in the next stage.
I think the other option that was also considered was whether or not we could squirrel some space out of, say, Central Car Park for delivery vehicles to park there. And then, yes, of course, they've got to carry the goods across, but they're pretty close to the borough then. And it might be slight inconvenience, but, you know, still produce a much better environment, hopefully, in the borough. But these are just ideas at the moment. So, you know, it's not, these are not, the whole thing is not tablets of stone at all. And these are the sort of things that, you know, get your views back on. Deliveries are certainly high on our agenda. I mean, David Howell mentioned that earlier on. We aren't looking to close the town off to deliveries. That is certainly not the case. What we're trying to do with a lot of other things is provide alternative means. Because just because the way we do it now doesn't mean to say it's got to be the way that we continue to do it. Now, you've heard me say this before. If we carry on doing what we've always done, we'll get what we always got.
Chris, weren't you also looking at some rather innovative ideas that might add to the atmosphere of the town, such as the bigger vehicles, such as a UPS truck that comes to Sylvia, unloading in the car park into smaller vehicles, perhaps smaller vehicles, rickshaws, absolutely, cargo bikes, things that when moving around between the pedestrians and the cafe society that I dream of, will add to the atmosphere and perhaps have a bit of advertising on them that helps fund them, and we're all sat there with a glass of wine or a big cup of coffee, thanking this team.
And just to add to that, the major operators like UPS are in fact in a number of towns and cities around the country are in fact moving goods around on cargo bikes. So these major operators that are doing deliveries, they are already there and they are already thinking about this, and they will be very happy to sort of discuss those types of measures with us, and we'll be exploring that as we move forward.
So Sylvia, thank you very much. Sylvia, thank you for your question. Perhaps if you get the chance, you might ask UPS what plans they've got and ask if they can carry a cargo bike on the back to deliver your books in sometime in the future. Chris, sorry.
Sorry, just to say what you're referring to is a freight consolidation centre, which is just out on the outskirts. And at that point, they offload and then they put onto small electric vehicles, cargo bikes, whatever, and trundle them into town. Yes, a bit more of a a longer journey as opposed to using local car parks, but it keeps them out of the town centre completely then.
I stand corrected on the detail of that, Chris, thanks. Now, Sylvia, please come back to if there's anything else, but I'm rather hoping that that's your question properly answered. Say Jay Hunt, I presume that means Jerry popped over and you've chatted about it with him. Even better than talking to us, I guess. I think that's all the questions, everybody.
Can I just comment, Wyatt, Tim Clark just butting in again. When I'm not in Farnham, I'm in York. And York is a very interesting example of how people overcome delivery problems. You just have the timing worked out, don't you? I mean, the timings are all crucial to getting things in at the right time. And of course, things come at the wrong time of day, and there's special allowances for that. So I think that all the things that we are talking about now are to do with timing and organization and making things separate enough in time as well as space. So I leave that as a thought with you.
The thought that I would attach to that, Tim, is one of enforcement, or how do we make sure people voluntarily follow the new timings? They don't do a particularly good job of the 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock that's in force at the moment, I don't think. Right, I do want to move on. I do want to kind of conclude on where we've got to. I am looking back at the objectives we set ourselves. I think we have kind of addressed the needs. People have caught up on them. Pete lobbed in that he wants the cycling opportunities sooner. I think we were all generally agreeing that we can't let the status quo continue. I'm really pleased to hear that from the business perspective, because we've already heard it from the customers or the individual pedestrians that visit town perspective. Quick wins has led to a number of interesting discussions about how quick they are. And the one from George about the station car park, that must be one that we can add to our list. And if we get a yes, might even be done within 3-6 months. I'll hold my breath, should I, Jonathan? We talked about supporting options for business. I think we very much need to look, and a number of you referred to the parking case, and that's definitely on our agenda for going forward. And we talked about, could we change behaviours? I think many of you were sort of saying, well, it's not so much could we, it's we're going to have to, but we have to incentivise that. We have to introduce the alternatives. So the route around the outside of town, so people don't drive through the centre, the better arrangements of park and ride or parking on the edge of town rather than insisting on parking in central car park, without, of course, forgetting those that just have to park in the central town because of their different needs. We look for your insight in development of business. I really liked, and perhaps it's not getting enough weight in the OIP, the point about holiday opportunities, because Farnham does have the potential for leisure and unique businesses, the castle, the maltings. Those things are right next to the businesses and retail outlets to make it an attractive place for people to come. Destination town being that next objective. And we looked at the opportunities there. And I think you reassured everybody that we are looking at what's happened elsewhere and using that information. Chris, I ought to congratulate you on not doing a comparison to Durham. And Lucy brought in the point about delighted about reducing traffic, but also remembering accessibility. We didn't rest a lot on the return from COVID, although we talked about the time when we'll be moving the temporary arrangements out of town. But Tim Clark made an important point about rest points, and that's perhaps something that we'll need to think about given the large rest points that are available at the moment, because we've widened the pavements and won't be there. And I've got quicker question mark, George Murray. George, I'm sorry, I can't remember what the point was I was going to make there about the return from COVID. Perhaps it was the point about whether we could get the shops and the people back sooner from COVID, and what other influences other than traffic and highways we might be able to do. And I said, well, one thing I know you can do is write to your local county council, and the three of us are listening in. What I'd now like to do is hand over to my good colleague, Andy, who's been sat there relatively patiently. Let me remind you that I particularly like the idea of handing over to Andy, because I see Stephen and I as the sort of the three cavaliers or something like that really got started on how we had to get the town centre with the Farnham Town Centre plan.
Yeah.
And we've worked together closely. Andy, I know you're standing again in May, but Stephen and I aren't. We're dropping out, and potentially, and I can see signs of relief around all the officers. This is the last kind of public meeting you'll have the, dare I say, opportunity or problem of dealing with the pair of us. So, and you're going to have to do the closing remarks and thank everybody. I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah, very, very kind of you, Wyatt, and thank you for these remarks. I wonder if Ian or Claire would be good enough to bring up the what comes next slide, please. And while they're doing that, I'll just actually start by thanking various people who've contributed towards this event. First of all, of course, the attendees, that although we had a smaller audience in the general discussions where we often get around 100 or more people, we've had a much smaller number, but we've still had a very, very good discussion. So thank you for the audience. It was interesting and useful. I must also thank Ian and Claire from the Town Council, who do all the behind the scenes organisation, all the invitations, make sure it works well on the night. And Peter Birch, actually from Arcadis, he actually coordinates between the project team and Ian and Claire and so on, and does all the slides. So thanks, and there's a lot of work behind the scene work goes on. Of course, we have to thank the speakers, Chris, Jonathan, Alex, and Paula, and as has been mentioned, Chris is standing down. I don't think Chris is going to disappear quickly entirely in the near future. He'll still be around, but he is handing over to a new program director, a chap called Simon Duke, who's going to be who is a full-time employee of Surrey County Council. I'll just mention that I think Chris deserves a lot of thanks actually as he's leaving. It was commented by members of the public at the last LLF meeting that Chris was very much a straight talking guy from the north, very open, very interesting. So thanks for all you've done, Chris, from all of us. And I must also thank, of course, Wyatt for having chaired the meeting well. And I do concur with his remarks about the three. It's actually the three musketeers, Wyatt, not the three cavaliers, I don't think. But there'll be three new county councils, and it'll be up to them. I may be one of them. It depends what happens at the election, of course. But there'll be three new county councils, and they'll be vital to what goes forward. Turning to what comes next slide, basically there is the consultation finishing on Sunday, the 14th of March. I will say that this is not a deadline in the sense that you'll be cut off 1 minute after midnight. If there'll be a little bit of discretion. We don't want to actually encourage people to respond late because we have another deadline, and there's the purdah period for elections starting the 22nd of March, and that's got to be taken into account in all of this. So we do want people to respond by the 14th if they possibly can, but a few hours late or even a day late is not the end of the world. The other thing that will happen next is that the project team will be, the program team, they'll be reviewing and analysing all the consultation responses, and sometime after the local elections, they'll be coming out with their conclusions of all that and start moving towards what we're actually going to do. There will be further local liaison forums at that stage, but they're not shown down below. We've had 13 of them so far. This is the 13th. There's no date scheduled yet, but sometime after the local elections, after the team have done the work, there'll be further consultations. So I think we had a good meeting tonight. Thank you very much to everybody. And I have to declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.